You're listening to an Anazao Ministries podcast. How can lizards help us learn about our sponsorabilities? Sponsorabilities? I don't know. Hey guys, this is back with our drive-in series. We are going decade through decade, picking different films, and today we are talking about a film from the 1990s. We're talking about the 1998 film, The Rugrats Movie. I just reviewed a film from 1996 yesterday, so getting myself confused. But today is 1998, The Rugrats Movie. We'll talk about why we chose that here in a minute. But first, I have to introduce myself. I am Joshua Noel. No one cares about that. But I'm here with the wonderful and excellent Reverend Justin Coleman, who's had a very busy week and I'm sure can't wait to talk about babies.
I can't wait at all. Let's do it.
All right. So guys, if you want to see the rest of this series, we're going through the decades, seeing some movies. You can go down below in the description. There is a link to a playlist there. We're going to jump right into this today. We're going to just jump into this. Let's just say, for some reason, up near Chapel Hill, there's a drive-in doing Flashback a day. And it's like, hey, we decided to play the Rugrats movie. And for some reason, Justin and I said, yeah, that's a good cause for us to get together, get in our cars, and go to the movies. So we go to the drive-in, Justin, and we watch the Rugrats movie. You look over to me, and what's the first thing you say?
That's not quite what I expected. There was more for adults there than I imagined.
Yeah, it's a little weird. Like I had to think more than I expected to have to think. Yeah. So like my first words, honestly, I'll be real. Like I want to say my first words would be like, let me think about that. But in reality, I probably looked at Justin and went, where do you think Okie Dokie Jones is going next? When's he going to find the Temple of Doom? I love
a great
that
beginning.
Because I did not remember this movie when I went to. I remember, and we were talking about before we aired, I remember the third Rugrats movie because it's Rugrats Go Wild and they meet the Thornberrys. For some reason, I don't remember being a really big Rugrats fan growing up, but I love the Wild Thornberrys. So when they did that crossover, I was all about that movie. I loved that. And then the second one had a really good video game I loved because it had like a putt-putt mini game. And I don't remember anything other than I loved the putt-putt parts. So I went through this game on the Nintendo 64 playing all the putt-putts for Rugrats 2. But yeah, just watching that and just like it starting with Okie Dokie Jones and trying to get the treasure and then the boulder following down. And I'm like, this is great. Like, it's like a 90s reference within a 90s movie. It's like double 90s. We may have picked the most 90s thing you could see.
Yes.
Which
Little did we know.
But it was part of the point because there's like when we're talking about like 90s movies, there are so many better movies we could have chose. And I'm surprised Justin let me choose this. Like I'm sure he was like, Josh, you're a huge Harrison Ford fan. We could have done Air Force One. We could have done like any of the Jack Ryan movies. Like there are so many movies we could have chosen from. Indiana Jones itself. I think there was one in the 90s. There's Jurassic Park, and it's like, of all those, why Rugrats? Well, I'll tell you why Rugrats. In my mind, the reason was when I'm thinking of the 90s for me and for all those like fellow 90s kids, we grew up with a few things. Disney was big for me because I lived in Florida, but also Nicktoons. The 90s Nicktoons was like a staple of 90s childhood. And so you're talking like Angry Beavers, Rugrats, all those things. And the big one that actually made it to the movies was the Rugrats.
Right.
So also it's because like I just wanted to spice stuff up. I was like, we'll do something anime. We'll do something unexpected. I don't think anybody expected us to do the Rugrats movie. So part of it was a little bit of
anyone, including us, some of us at least.
We didn't even expect it. I was surprised by myself. But then like I watched it and I was like, wow. Okay, so not only is everyone dressed like super 90s, not only are they making 90s references to other 90s movies, the family dynamics are very 90s. I feel like every single piece of this, like the color scheme, the animation, because I'm big into like Disney animation. I'm watching this going, are these the same people? They're not. The animators are actually the people who did the early Simpsons stuff, which is kind of cool.
That is
but
cool.
like it all looks like Disney, like 90s animation even. And I'm like, everything about this is so quintessential 90s that it was perfect in that way. It had other flaws, but in that way, I was like, wow, if I ever wanted someone to just like know what the 90s was like, I could just have them watch this. Oh, man.
Wow. Yeah. Who would have thought this is the movie that is the mirror for the 90s? If you want to have a mirror for the age of the 90s, Rugrats is where you go.
What's so funny is like, I feel like last week, Will and Kevin, they did Flash Gordon for the 80s. And like, I'm like, wow, that is so 80s.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's a perfect pick. And I'm like, I love the 90s, but I kind of feel weird that this is the one that I was like, yeah, this is as 90s as you get.
It may inspire some viewership after this episode, so that will be good.
I hope so. So yeah. So I was the one who chose this one. Justin let me. I think slightly reluctantly. I tried to bait him. I was like, it's really 90s, and we can talk about family dynamics. It's in my mind. Justin wanted to talk about family dynamics, so maybe he'd let me do that. So I kind of went through my relationship with the Rugrats. What about you, Justin? Did you have any like background? Any of your kids watch it growing up or anything with the show? Or
So my middle kiddo watched it some. I think my eldest just didn't pay much attention. I think my middle guy watched it some, and I watched it in a passive way with him. So I never really got into Rugrats. And so when you mentioned this, I thought, wow, this is, in all of 90s fandom, which I think I'm pretty up on so much of it. This was like the weakest link in mine, And I thought, well, hey, this is an opportunity for 90s growth for me when I didn't think I had any room to grow. You gave me this opportunity. And so, yeah, I couldn't remember actually having seen the Rugrats movie. And and even after watching it, I don't know that I did, or maybe I saw parts of it. But yeah, I was just ready for the ride, man. You invited me to the drive-in and I said, dude, I'm going to do it. Let's just go. Let's go.
Oh man. What's funny, so I mentioned like it wasn't my favorite 90s show, but like watching it, I'm like, I do get the appeal. I really do.
Yeah.
And what I liked about the movie though is I feel like you don't need the show. Like I feel like the show enhances it because like you already know and you love the characters, but I don't think you actually need it. Because pretty early on they establish who everybody is. Angelica is very clearly the mean bully kid. I think the only thing that maybe the show helps with is some of the context of like the weird like language stuff in the Rugrats world where babies have their own language and adults have their own language. And Angelica's this weird age where she can speak both, but they don't understand each other. And she is the worst person to be the translator possible. But I think other than that, I think you don't need anything else from the show to get this movie. Justin, if you had to explain the plot of the Rugrats movie, how would you lay it out?
So I would frame this plot, if I can go biblical here, that it's in some ways a classic story of jealousy, and as old as Cain and Abel, Joseph and his what would be a great Pride Technicolor Dreamcoat. You've got Jacob and Esau. So you've got all of these stories of siblings in the Bible, and how the younger one seeks to usurp or the elder, and or there's this striving between siblings, and this is what you get. So at the core of this story for me really is about what happens when a younger sibling is introduced into the mix that is not what you expect. You've been excited about this kiddo, perhaps. Then in reality, you've got to deal with these feelings of jealousy. And what if I don't really like this kid and how they are
Yeah.
disrupting my life? And so it really is a journey. It's a family movie. It's a movie about brothers, but it's a
Mhm.
movie about journeying from jealousy to true brotherly love.
Yeah. Yeah. And one thing like I forgot is that the Rugrats are like the show itself and the family. They're very
Mhm.
Jewish. And I forget about that.
Yes.
But like
Yes.
when you see it as an adult, like just some of like the language and like how they're speaking, I be like, oh wait, that's right. And then I remembered there are episodes in the show where Tommy just straight up plays Moses. And I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I think some of those like brotherly biblical connections are probably intentional,
Hmm.
which is fun. And I love the story is the parallelism, right? So the baby's coming, there's a pregnant, and Tommy has this idea of what this baby's going to be like, whatever. He shows up,
Hmm.
they're struggling with this jealousy and why won't the baby act like us kind of stuff, which is funny coming from other babies. Um, but they're frustrated. He's just whining. He poops his pants. He's not helping. He's not doing anything. He's making life harder for us. And then you see the adults, Tommy's dad, as well as his, Tommy's uncle, his dad's
Hmm.
brother, having very similar jealousy kind of like things. So that parallelism throughout the film, and then
Yes.
seeing how the adults have to overcome their jealousy to save the babies who get lost because they're trying to return the new baby. Yeah, don't worry about it.
Right.
but, seeing how the adults have that same jealousy. And I think what's funny is like as a kid, you're just like, oh, haha, this is all funny. And you just kind of look at the joke. But as an adult, I'm looking at this going, oh, that's right.
Yeah.
We are so childish sometimes,
Right. Right.
And
And these are fundamental human issues that we're talking about,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
I think that's where the parallelism is that this is fundamental human issues and spiritual issues that we struggle with and throughout our lives in various ways, and we're called to overcome in various ways. And so, yeah, I thought that was it's a cool parable in that way.
oh yeah, yeah. And I love how what's interesting is for the kids, you see like they search for the wizard and they eventually they overcome their jealousy. Sorry, the lizard.
Lizard,
I
yeah,
can't
yeah,
pronounce wizard, so it's
yeah,
lizard. and Tommy's using his power that his dad gave him. His dad gave him this like watch, whatever.
right,
And his dad gave him a speech about responsibility when he gave him the watch. So he thinks that he has a superpower called sponsorabilities, and it's
yes.
encapsulated in this watch that he's using.
That uses like a compass.
Yeah, but it's a watch.
Yeah, right.
But just because luck and chance, they happen to get there, and their dad shows up in a weird outfit thing. Don't worry about it. So they think he's the lizard, and they think that what happened is they went on the spiritual mystic journey, and they got what they wished for, and now everything's good.
Hmm.
When in reality, we know it's like, that's not really what happened. They just mistook what was going on. And what's funny is like I think that talks a lot too about
Hmm.
different levels of maturity, even in our faith.
Right.
And I know that's not intentional, probably, but I'm thinking like some of us need this like idea of this mystical journey or spiritual, like over spiritualized things. And sometimes those who are more mature, maybe we don't get the mystical bits as much. I hope we still do. I think it's important in everyone's life.
Hmm.
But sometimes I think as you mature, you learn to kind of do that growth without having to have the mystical journey.
Right.
Hopefully.
Or you see a bit of mystery in all things, even the more simple everyday thing. In the mundane, there is also a sense of mystery. I mean, I think you've heard me say before that I'm as I work with my spiritual director, I'm an aspiring mystic. But that mysticism is grounded in a pursuit of seeing God in all things, not just in something that I think is some exceptional spiritual moment, but really in all things, in all the everyday things, and seeing a bit of mystery. And so what I love about this is that there is this, I mean, you can find meaning.
Mhm.
Both the children find meaning in this experience that from their perspective, all they can see is, wow, this has been a magical thing, magical, mystical moment here. And we have a different perspective. We're seeing all the same events through a different angle, with a different lens, with a different understanding. Yet we also derive similar meaning, which is kind of cool. And I think sometimes that's the way faith works as well.
Well, and that's, growing up Pentecostal, this is a particularly sensitive thing for me.
Yeah.
But, I'm looking at it and I can see where at one point in my life, I'm where the babies are. And I thought that I needed to seek out a wizard, basically, and that if I prayed the right prayer or whatever, things would just happen. And that was my experience. So that's how I interpreted things. And then as you get older, you're watching it and you're like, wait a minute, that might not have been mystical, but a bunch of babies getting lost in the woods with a wild wolf, and your dog just happening to show up at the right moment, and your dog just happening to land in the perfect place to survive. Like there's a lot of just so happens that you're like, there's still a lot of mysticism here that maybe isn't a lizard or your responsibilities, but you're like, no, there is still something special that's happening here that's more than what meets the eye.
Right.
And of course it's a movie, so the just so happened was written, but still, like, I think that happens in real life still.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of which, this is just a fun, like, I was thinking about this earlier today. So I'm glad we didn't record when we originally planned, because I was thinking about this going, wow, there's a lot of weird coincidence with me in this movie. So when this movie first came out, my mom was pregnant with my baby brother. And I remember thinking, because they told me all about what it's going to be like to have a brother. And I was like, I'm going to have someone to play soccer with, all this. And I was really confused when there was a baby, because I was like, you can't play soccer. I'm 5 years old. I didn't know any better. I thought they were just going to go get me a brother. So I was like, what's this? How's he gonna? And what's funny too is now I'm at a point in my life, and if my brother listens, it's fine, whatever, we've talked about it, where my brother, in a lot of ways, the way that like the world would measure things, especially, he's more successful than me in a lot of areas. So it is kind of one of this, like, I'm tempted. I don't think I've ever quite fallen into the jealousy trap, but I've been tempted with it before. And it's so funny that, like, I've been able to watch this movie at least twice in my life, once as a child with a baby coming along the way, and once as an adult with that same brother realizing, oh, hey, this is still relevant somehow.
Yeah. No, it is powerful as we think about the relationships of siblings. My younger brother was just in town a few weeks ago, and you get to a certain age and you don't spend very many days together, but we spent an entire week together and in this and negotiating space together and such, but also reminiscing and thinking about those younger years and the times of childish striving that we went through, and it's just part of the sibling experience in so many ways, as we learn to be secure in ourselves, as we learn to see our siblings and like who they are and appreciate that, and get over this. I mean, the amounts of times we saw a tug of war in this movie, and how that happens as kids, and then how you do tugs of war in adult life sometimes, and how things sometimes break, how things are torn apart by that, and then you've got to have some kind of moment of realization. Hopefully have some kind of moment of realization where you come back together. And it's always lamentable when people don't.
Yeah. Well, and even sometimes, I'm trying to find good words for this. To me, I think there's a lot of like, hey, we're human, and sometimes we just can't help but feel things. And I think it's just, I think the healthiest approach is to just be as self-aware as possible. So, for example, there are a lot of things I mentioned I'm tempted to be jealous of my brother with. And I remember when I brought my dog over to his house and their dogs were playing, and I had this thought for a moment where I was like, my dog's better behaved than his. And, like my immediate thought is like, oh, I'm going to rub that in. You're like, you have that feeling. And just to be self-aware, to be like, wait a minute, that's childish. Like, calm down. Like, who literally cares? His dog is a puppy.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. Yeah, we just find it's, again, I think you say, I mean, it's part of the human experience. Comparison is part of the human experience, and those that are closest to us, know how to whether they are intending to do so or not, know how to push our buttons and get underneath our skin more quickly than almost anybody else, right?
Oh yeah. So I'm gonna open a small can of worms before we wrap this one up. So we talked about a lot of how it's jealousy, and the way that the movie handles it is the way that you overcome jealousy is by realizing you have a responsibility to your family. Mm-hmm. Whether or not you're upset with them or whatever, you're responsible for your family in some meaningful way that you got to get over yourself a little bit and kind of push through. That's kind of how the movie portrays it. And it harkens back for me to my favorite book, C.S. Lewis, The Four Loves. Everyone's tired of me talking about it, but they'll get over it. And when Lewis talks about family love, he actually mentions this as like a dangerous thing of how we just expect one another to love each other when you're family, and you almost take it for granted. And it's like, oh, well, you're supposed to. And sometimes we deal with really toxic relationships that we shouldn't, because society has told us that's your responsibility. That's your family. But also the Bible does have that whole, am I my brother's keeper? So like, there's a lot of like, but alsos to this conversation.
This is a great can of worms, by the way, to open. Seriously, thank you. So yes, I mean, I do think there are unhelpful forms of or frameworks around responsibility that we can adopt, and that can keep us in an unhealthy relationship, or the posture we have toward our responsibilities. It's not a healthy one. I think that in the midst of a contemplation around responsibility in the movie, the exact moment of Tommy and Dill's relationship being transformed, there's a moment in the movie where it really happens, and that there's a lightning strike as Tommy is about to pour banana baby food on Dill so that the monkeys will take him away.
Hearing you describe this moment is great.
You gotta watch the movie, but it is a very dramatic moment. It's nighttime light. The lightning is flashing, and he is it's the Rugrats version of Lion King, where it's like Scar and Mufasa there, and like about to throw him over the edge of the cliff there. So it's even though the elder brother is the one doing the pouring,
is just
yeah, and the monkeys are are the hyenas or something like that. So it's this moment. It's this big moment, and there. Dill looks at Tommy, and Tommy looks at Dill, but also looks at his reflection in the water. Tommy looks at his own reflection in the water. He sees how this jealousy, how this anger and frustration has transformed him, has transfigured him in a negative way. And he looks at his brother, and he begins to, in a moment, in literally a lightning flash moment, he begins to cherish him. They begin to cherish one another. And so perhaps responsibility only comes alive with some sense of cherishing. That's what makes it healthy.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is, like, you said reflection, and I just started thinking of the Mulan song. but I feel like the words kind of fit, right? Like except for the girl part. But like, who is this person? We'll say person instead of girl, but like, who is this person I see staring straight back at me? Why is my reflection someone I don't know? And like that identity question, even though it's framed differently here, because Mulan, it's all about like trying to find power as a woman kind of thing, and that's definitely not what's happening here. But Tommy does have this like this whole movie. He's going to be the best big brother, and he's so excited, and he's like, I have a responsibility. My dad gave me the sponsibility, and he gets fed up because it's just gotten too hard. And let's be real, family's hard. That's so real.
Yeah.
Like. But then he sees himself trying to get rid of his brother because he decided he's going to give up. And he goes, wait a minute. Who is this person? Because this isn't me. This isn't who I want to be.
Yeah.
Man, yeah. Yeah. So I do. I feel like you're right. It's that reflection and also that genuine care that develops right then. Because he said, wait a minute. I'm not just doing this not just because it's a responsibility, because I care for the other person. Yeah. And I think that's definitely part of it. I'm still struggle a little bit because I'm hung up on C.S. Lewis, because C.S. Lewis tells the story of a mother who waits up all night. Right. So the whole family is like, oh man, I can't be out late because I don't want mom to be up late waiting on me, even if it's for something good. Right. And then, the husband feels like he can't be late from work, all this stuff. And then when she passes away, no one would ever say it, but they realize their life got a lot easier. And it's not because she wasn't trying. She was working hard. She doing everything she could to be the best mom, the best, wife, and did all this for her family. But she needed to be needed so bad that she put that responsibility on everyone. And that kind of put a huge strain on the relationship. So I don't know, like part of me is like, I like the responsibility and I like the care. But then also I feel like it can be taken too far to where like we need to be needed. And then that can become toxic too. So maybe there's a good middle ground.
Yeah, well, I mean, like so many things, a sense of mutuality, where if there's a sense of mutuality, if there's a sense of mutual care, mutual love and cherishing, but also mutual sacrifice, if you are self-sacrificing for someone else, you don't get yourself in the situation that Lewis is talking about. You don't. And you only enter into that space when you become the center of that relationship. The energies of the relationship move towards you, not in a mutual
you want people to know you're the best mom. You want the family to know you're the best wife. And you're doing it so much that it's putting that obligation on others because it's really about you, even though the act is you're acting like it's for the other.
Yeah.
It's
a distortion.
That's good. Yeah. Which is where it's hard to get love right. And we need the ultimate love maybe to help correct some of our other loves every now and then.
That's right. It's, disordered, moving from a disordered affection to a properly ordered affection.
Ooh, or actually, going back to the movie, what if we need friends too? Because, I'm thinking of like the friends that Tommy had. He had Phil and Lil who are always pushing him to like, who cares about this baby? This baby's dumb. Take it back. But then you have Chucky, right? Who, he had his up and downs in the films, but ultimately he said, no, I stand with my best friend. And if that means I have to help take care of his baby too, you know what? I'm there.
Yeah.
But Chucky also did have a point at one point where he said, I think you're taking this too far. So I think a friend like Chucky might be what it takes to say, hey, you're not doing this quite right. You're not being healthy in this manner.
Oh, that's great. I'm glad you pointed it out because, the Rugrats, just generally speaking, it is about friendship and how friends make us better. Our lives are made possible by our friends, and who we are is made possible by our friends who are like family in this movie and in this television series. So yeah, absolutely, friendship and the accountabilities around friendship and how friendship acts as its own kind of mirror for us as a part of this movie, and yes, certainly something to take note of.
Such good stuff. Honestly, it's just such a good movie. Like it really is. I won't say it's like one of my new favorites, but I am like, man, I've been taking this for granted. I did not realize how good this movie was.
Yes.
So speaking of which, Justin, if you had to rate it 0 to 10, how would you rate the Rugrats movie?
Wow.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is a tough one because I'm kind of on a Rugrats high right now. It was more impacting than I than I thought. I mean, I enjoyed it more than I
Oh
thought.
yeah.
So I would put it in the scope of 90s movies, however.
Yeah.
I'm going to put it at it's at a 7 for me. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a good, solid message, and enjoyed it. I think it did what it set out to do. So it's a strong 7 for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I have to explain my rating because like my rating is not going to match up to the hype I'm giving the film. I feel like, because I think in a lot of ways this film was groundbreaking. I feel like it did a lot to give a message both to the parents and to the kids that's digestible for each on different levels. And I thought, man, that was really cool. And the fact is, I can't think of a single other IP where a movie came from a TV show, was good on its own, but also added something to the show. The show after this movie is completely different because all of a sudden there's a new character and the dynamic of everybody's changed. And they've done that successfully with all 3 movies. So it's one of those where I'm like, man, that's something I can't think of another IP that successfully pulled that off. You know, like maybe a TV movie, but no, a theater movie that actually changes everything and it makes the show better afterwards. That's crazy. That is crazy how they did that.
Yeah.
The animation was great. The humor was pretty good. You know, like everything's on point. It's difficult. I would say, I think everyone should see this movie. I think it's a movie everyone should watch because it is worth seeing. But also, man, you know, again, when I rate, I'm comparing it to all films, right? So 0 being the worst film I've ever seen, maybe The Room, maybe Twilight, 10 being the best. So we're talking like, you know, Captain America, Winter Soldier, Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
So it's clearly not, for me, Okie Dokie Jones isn't quite as good as Indiana Jones.
Right.
But if 5 is average, I think it's better than average. I'm putting it at a 6.
Yeah.
Because it's definitely better than average. I think it's something everyone should see, but I'm not willing to put it up there with some of the greatest movies I've seen, you know?
Yeah, well, you're right. I mean, if you're looking at that whole spectrum,
it's just hard to put it somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely above a 5. So.
Oh, yeah. And to be fair, it probably would have gotten higher if it wasn't for, it's hard for me to think like I'm rating a 90s animated film and not go other 90s animated films, Lion King, Hercules, Mulan, Tarzan. Like, it's hard to be up there with that. And though I will say, because this is a fun fact, the writers on this are also the writers for Shrek 2, which is one of the other greatest animated films I can think of. Like, I'm like, it's just hard when you're putting this with so many other great films. It's like, but it's something I think everyone should see. I wouldn't say it's as good as Shrek 2 either. Shrek 2 was good.
Yeah.
It's a really good movie.
Yeah. I think it's your 6 is good. That's
all right.
That's probably where it should be. Yeah.
But I still want everyone to watch it. All right. So, hey, as we're wrapping this up, I changed up our end question a little bit because I mentioned to you, I think before, and I might have mentioned it on air. I don't remember, but there was when Rugrats Go Wild came out, there was this like novelty stuff. And I remember Burger King or Wendy's, one of them had those jelly beans and some of them were like good flavors. And then some of them was like boogers. Cause you know, it was like Rugrats. So it was like nasty stuff. And I just remember it actually made me nauseous. Like I remember being so excited to do it because I'm like, oh yeah, I love this. And then be like, oh, maybe I don't. Can you think of like any like gimmick snack or drink that you had because of a movie that you were like, I don't know, I didn't like that?
Boy, that is a really good question. And I don't know that, well, if there is one, it might have been the Harry Potter jelly beans.
Only
because, you know, of the various flavors, only because like I'm not a big jelly bean guy out of the gate. Like, you know.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's like gonna be, if I'm in a candy store, that's one of the last things I'm gonna try is jelly beans. I don't know. That's just me. Yeah. So I did try some of those and I didn't think, oh, they're so gross. It just wasn't my thing. Yeah. So that's probably the movie related one for me.
The most wrong opinion I have on this that I've changed. I remember once as a kid, but somewhere, it might have been Arby's or Burger King, they did a Shamrock milkshake for Shrek 2, I think it was when it came out. And as a kid, I was like, oh, a green milkshake. And I drank it. I was like, oh, that's gross. And now as an adult, I'm like, wait a minute. I love Shamrock milkshakes. I think it was just because it was green. I just didn't understand as a kid. Oh, man. Good stuff, though.
Very good stuff.
All right, guys. Well, hey, we hope you enjoyed this drive-in. Be sure to rate and review our show on Podchaser, Spotify, or Apple Podcast. Again, you can see all of the drive-ins we've done throughout the decades in this series we're doing this summer using the link that's down in the description. And we hope you do us a huge favor. And remember, we're all a chosen people, a geekdom of priest.
Hello, friends. If you like systematic ecology, then there's a host of other podcasts in our network that we think you will like just as much. And so we're part of the Anazal Ministry Podcast Network, and we hope that you can hop over and subscribe with all the podcasts that are on our network. Like, for instance, The Homily, which is, hey, Pastor Will Rose's sermon here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina at Holy Trinity Lutheran Church. You have another podcast called The Whole Church Podcast, the OG, the originals, the beginner of it all. Yes, Joshua, Noel, and TJ working for unity among the church and having great conversations with the wide spectrum of those who are involved in Christian ministry and the church. You have My Seminary Life by Brandon Knight, who's discussing what he's learning in seminary, he is learning his theological studies and bringing to the surface those big things that we're wrestling with and thinking through theologically in the church and beyond. There's the Let Nothing Move You podcast from Christian Ashley, who is walking through the Bible in a very Bible study type fashion and walking through the biblical narrative. You have Dummy for Theology. I don't think Joshua is a dummy, but hey, he's going to lift up theological themes that he's thinking about and wrestling with. And maybe there's not a lot of answers, but there's definitely a lot of great questions out there that he's lifting up with some great theologians across the whole spectrum of Christianity. And then there's the Bible After Hours. Man, if you like to get risky, if you like to get controversial, there's this foul-mouthed preacher who goes through the Bible from a more progressive point of view, challenging the status quo of the modern church. Yeah, you don't want any kids around with that podcast. And then you have the Clydes, one of my favorite couples that I like to listen to. One of the hosts here on Systematic Ecology, Taylor and Elizabeth Clyde, go through weekly discussions and kind of a devotional, conversational method of what's going on in their lives, where they see God moving in their lives, and what God is up to in the world. So those are the podcasts, a part of the AMP network. Subscribe, follow. We hope you can be a part of all that great network with the wonderful podcasts at AMP.